Good evening and welcome to Whiskey Wednesday. Joining me is the ninja Dr. Jason Pittman. Tonight we're going to be talking about the differences between a job and a career. I might even have a couple other special questions for the ninja. I'm your host, Dr. Dan Ford, and this is EchelonOrchid.
Guess who's back?
Hello, my friend.
Guess who's back?
Cheers.
This guy.
Cheers to you, my friend. Thank you for
Cheers.
Or as I like to tell everyone, people don't get the computer, science joke in there. A lot of it, joining me for a glass or 10 of whiskey. 1-0 is two in binary there, folks. It's not 10. But
Yeah.
not that we haven't put down 10 at a particular night, but I don't think we could do it on air and be coherent.
I remember when me, you, and Mr. Starland went out to, what was that, Boar's Head?
Yeah.
Was that for, I think that was your dissertation defense.
Yep.
It was. And I offered to pay.
Yeah, well.
Yikes, dude. Yikes.
You've got three professionals in there that love single malt.
There's something about single malts and conversation.
Oh, absolutely there is.
And then late night phone calls from Mrs. Pittman asking, what exactly did you just purchase?
Well, I can only imagine, her thinking, because, I can imagine what mine would be thinking. What the hell is going on with a couple $1,000 bar bill? The only way that could really happen is at a particular club, right? Or, 6 hours at a, it was I wouldn't say a high end, but it was on the upper tier bar.
For that end, yeah, man. They had that nice, we didn't sit in it, but Boar's Head, when I used to go as part of Capitol, had that nice outdoor patio. They'd have live music. You could smoke cigars and have whiskey. It was really nice, actually.
Oh, yeah.
Anyway, thanks for having me back, man.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So, I posed a particular question to you on Twitter, and that was, could you foresee a way in which you could have been an Auschwitz guard? Right now,
Yeah, sure.
Now, for those that don't know, that's not being flippant. It's not. Mm-hmm. It's really not being any type of what's the anti-Semitic. This is literally an aspect of I've been starting over the last several weeks of getting into Carl Jung and shadow work, and as part of that and different stuff that I've read, I wonder, honestly, if I grew up in Nazi Germany, what's the probability that I could have rejected that evil? And, I honestly, I would love to believe I'm one of the most, righteous people. I mean, I certainly tell, and believe it myself that I have this, code that is, closer to Batman than it would be a Superman. It's gray, anti-hero like in some cases. I like to believe that I would reject that, we'll say dogma, for lack of a better word at the moment. But I don't know.
Yeah.
And that was really where I was going. Like, I honestly don't know.
I think it's a great question, man, and it probes to the heart of what it is to be human. And I think I would start with this. I mean, I'll repeat my answer and I'll explain it, but it starts with this. Fundamentally, modern in like in our time, right? Post World War II, we examine that question and we forget that you might have not really had an option, right? I mean,
it's right. It's possible.
Right. We pretend as if we could have had a choice, and you may not have had a choice in that instance, depending on where you were at. That's besides the point. It's interesting that you said that to me, though, man, because I gave you a very honest answer. My answer was yes, and that's exactly why it would never happen for me, because I can imagine the circumstances in which I would participate in that. And I don't say that like you. I don't say it flippantly. I've just honestly thought about what makes me tick and what I am as a human being. and I understand where exactly that shadow exists within my consciousness, and I've integrated with it. And that's really what Jung's argument is that the people that don't believe they're capable of it are the people that become it, because they ignore how dark part of our humanity necessarily is by necessity. And yeah, man, there's absolutely circumstances that would lead to me being part of the Einsatzgruppen or the Schutzstaffel, right?
Right. Yeah.
And I can imagine those circumstances. I actually paid somebody, and I've talked about this before, I paid somebody a lot of money to teach me how to think about those situations. Not those specifically, right? But I don't know if I've ever told the story about what I paid this person for. They were a therapist. It wasn't therapy, but it was meditation. And particularly it was Jungian regression meditation. And, you go through these regressions and you start to connect with your subconscious, and that brings out, let's call them fairy tale characters. And so these anima manifest and they represent things. And so like my companion was a bear and a crow or a raven. And those symbolize things within Jung's hierarchy and archetypes. And then it got really strange, man. Then it got really strange because I sunk down into the earth. This won't surprise you, but okay. I don't know if I've ever told this story live.
No,
So-
but I've heard it before. I mean, I know.
Yeah, there was a lot of very...
That's how I started telling people why you were a shaman.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Just not the type that dispels ghost, in case any of those friends want to come over again.
Yeah.
And so, there was very archetypical things emerging out of my subconscious, which is what that process is supposed to do. It's because it's teaching you how to meditate and be mindful and connect to yourself and integrate that shadow into you. Except then it got really strange because at one point I went into a cave, which is a shamanic journey. You descend into the underworld to integrate with shadow. And that's literally what that is. Except I sunk down through the earth, popped out into the universe, and I floated around until I docked onto an asteroid, and there were 4 versions of me. That's a whole nother conversation, man. Which is all to say, yes, I can absolutely and have considered the circumstances in which I would participate in that, and that's exactly why it would never happen.
Yeah. So for those that don't know, the shadow work. I mean, essentially, I'm only starting to get more into it. I will really summarize it, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, Ninja. Basically, the way Jung had put it is that you have to look in that shadow being the worst part of ourselves, and if we follow those worst parts of ourselves, eventually it could lead a pathway directly to hell, and we could see how we could end up there. And so the best way to not end up there is to reject those things in yourself. You have to understand that you're capable of those worst things that would take you to hell, but you have to reject it. And by reject, I mean, not so to speak, turn away. You've got to have both, in there in order. Otherwise, you're taking away a part of yourself. But you just have to know, hey, that's probably not a good thing for me to do, and I've recognized that. And then from a leadership aspect, the reason why I think that's important is that a lot of people, when they don't embrace that shadow, the worst parts about themselves, they project onto others, and then that what winds up making them a bad leader. As an example, and this is a big reason why I think many CEOs that exist today will say, I'm only hiring people with degrees. And I think the reason for that is because they have this highfalutin degree themselves. And if someone could come along that was equally as intelligent and had no degrees, then did they waste that themselves? And so I think that could be a reason as to why people are so somewhat hung up on them, because they never embraced the shadow of themselves. And so then it led me down this whole aspect of, well, could I? And honestly, I would like to absolutely believe I am so confident that I would never be able to be an Auschwitz guard.
Yeah, well, this is one of the compelling things about the Christian morality code that I find appealing, in the sense that it resonates with me on this level, is that I don't necessarily abide by the concept of original sin. Okay, I do have a very strong sense of redemption arcs and the affordance of the affordance to every human being for the opportunity for redemption, which is why we've talked in the past about cancel culture and my rejection of it. And so, the idea is that you embrace your shadow self or the dark version so that you can reject it by choice, right? You don't reject it by ignoring it, because what happens is eventually the monster or the dragon comes up from the dark, and because you have no control over it, it rears its ugly head and consumes everything. And you see this manifest in all kinds of pathologies or abhorrent behaviors. Whereas the people, so this is the thing, like we could probably have, I don't know if you've mentioned this to TK at all, but I'd be interested in a three-way candid conversation, because, I'd like to say to him, I can imagine what it would be like to be in the situations you were and make the choices you did. But I wasn't, and I at this point never will be, right? But he's an example of, through the circumstances he went through and the training he went through, of somebody that I would imagine has a full integration between himself and shadow, right? He's integrated that, and he has total control over it. I would like to think we do, but in a different way. And so I think somewhere there's a common substrate of how you achieve that. And that's really what Jung was getting at, as I perceive Jung's work.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely. And this is a reason why, when I say I don't know how I would act, and here's a big reason why, for me personally, because for those that don't know, I have a very strong faith in how I worship, God, Jesus, things of that nature. And, that's for me. I don't talk about it a lot because, well, it's personal. And, I feel like it's better to live my life based on the actions, and for someone to say, oh, well, you're this because you do this, rather than me to say it and it mean nothing. So anyway, with that, the reason why is if I grew up in Nazi Germany, the probability that I would have had access to the same type of things that would have led me down this faith-based path that I have been on for this many years would likely not have been available. And because that not being available, I might not have had that moral substrate that you had mentioned that would allow me to reject that evil, because I would, I didn't have a way, at least from my belief, of living eternally, through God's grace, right? And so today, like if that were to happen today, I have zero doubts today, based on who I am right now, that I could reject that. I know I would not, because I know in the way I believe that this is my faith has that salvation. It would allow me to have a different way out. I wouldn't have had those things in Nazi Germany. That's the way I believe. That's why, because I've been thinking. I've been like, why could I have done that? So I had to analyze a lot of myself, and that's my conclusion.
Well, and it has a very strong, as you were pointing out earlier, a very strong connection to leadership. We've talked about before, and you've expanded on your thoughts very clearly as to it's a very improper way of leading people to motivate them through fear. Yeah. And so this is what Jung's shadow integration really speaks to, is like, I don't have a problem in my classrooms fundamentally, or with my kid, or with people around me, because I have an integration of that darkness. And when you act, this is better said this way. You and I have been around people that are straight up hardcore killers, right? Yeah. And I don't know about you, but to me, I can feel the difference around those people. I'm not talking about some mystical, empathetic bullshit. They just act differently, and they move differently, and they look differently. And they're different. And they're different because there's something different, right? Yeah. And when you're around something like that, you behave accordingly, right? And so that's part of leadership, is there's this intangible, let's call it body language, right? Or psychic transmission, not in a mystical way, but just in the expression of self. That's why a leader doesn't have to rule through fear or pain. You lead and people will follow, because the conjuration of self with that integration with shadow forces people into the hierarchy. Like, we pick up on that almost on a hormonal level, right? That's how I view it. And so, like, I'll give you a very poignant example, right? Once in a while, in an undergrad class, somebody thinks they want to be the class clown. Well, listen, dude, that ain't going to work out well for you. And I've never had to say it twice. I've only ever had to say it once. You've crossed the line. You can apologize, and we're not going to have a problem. And I'll wait. It always gets done, and we move on, and they end up being some of my best students, man. And that, I really think at this level of analysis, that's because of my integration with myself through the shadow, because I'm a fucking monster. I really am. We all are, right? I mean, and that's like this conversation I think having with somebody like TK that has become a monster in a very real way. And I mean that in the sincerest manner, right?
Well, you can't be a Navy SEAL and have ever sat on the sidelines, right? I mean, you're
right. Your hands are getting dirty.
Yeah, I mean, it has to. I mean, you're a soldier, and you're not just a soldier. You are a highly trained and skilled soldier. That is sole purpose is one thing, right? I mean, it's to win, to take out the enemy at whatever cost, right? So so check this out, okay? It's branching off a little bit. So I played this game with the entire executive team today. I started it on Monday, right? And so as part of this aspect of Young, and I'm going, okay, well, what could potentially prohibit or prevent or just not allow for my, the credit union to achieve greatness, or at a minimum, not achieve our current goals? And so what I did was I sent out on Monday a note, an email to this executives, and there's roughly 30 executives, right? And that's because on this Wednesday, it's the first Wednesday of every month. It's my, I get to lead the executive group discussion on whatever it is that we're going to discuss. So Monday I send out, we're playing a game, and the game consists of this. Your goal is to create the largest group possible that does not contain a witch or sorcerer. I'm going to send you an email separately that tells you if you are normal or a witch or sorcerer. And then you have to go, and you have to ask questions. You're going to do this over chat because we don't have time to have hundreds of conversations. But this way you can send me the questions you've asked and why you believe a particular person might be a witch or a sorcerer. And remember, if you have a witch or sorcerer in your group, you lose. And so lots of groups were formed.
Imagine that.
Yeah. And so here's the lesson in this, so for those who don't know, everyone got the exact same email letter because I did a blind carbon copy, and it said, for the purposes of this game, you are normal. Everyone got that exact same email. So they had basically a day and a half. They sent me their stuff. I got to see some groups. Some groups, started off small. They merged with other groups. You could see this thing, the questions they were asking. It was great. And I told them, this is what I fear is the thing that will prevent us from greatness. And that is echo chambers. That is silos. That is cliques. It's our jobs as leaders to break all of those things down. And this is why diversity and inclusion is so important, because it's to break those barriers down. So that way we are all one band, one sound, with a mission towards having us be the greatest credit union that we can be. We need to achieve greatness. But I went through that whole thing, and the questions were hilarious. They were coming up with, they were having fun with it. But then I also got the lesson of all it takes is one person saying, why did that person get a promotion and not me? Why is that person on that project? Why is that person's an idiot? That person doesn't do good work. That person's the teacher's pet, so to speak. And then you have every culture that you're trying to build upon fall apart. So as leaders, you have to break all of those barriers down. So that's the game that I played today.
Well, that's awesome, man. That's fucking awesome. There's some interesting data there, because really what it gets down to, this ties right into your analysis of Nazi Germany in many ways, right? Or come on, man, in high school, I'm hoping we all we all read Lord of the Flies.
Yeah.
That's what all these silos are. They're
Yeah.
little islands that people get on, and they figure out how to organize themselves into a sub-hierarchy within this bigger hierarchy, and they get enough accretion of power and gravity and status quo, and fucking it's Lord of the Flies, dude. To the point, this is the craziest shit of all time, dude. To the point, people have replicated Nazi Germany in a political structure in scientific study. The most famous one is called the Third Wave Study. Well, remember, Nazi Germany was referred to as the Third Reich. And inevitably, because of group identity, and this is where you get into the difference between my personal disposition versus a situational construct, which goes to the intellectually honest answer is you really don't know whether you would or not because it's situational and not dispositional. Fuckers end up acting like Nazis. Imagine that. That study was done in California in the 50s.
Yeah. I mean,
if you're ever interested in it, there's a fantastic, this is even like double ironic. There's a fantastic German movie called Die Welle, or the Third Wave, or the Wave, that mirrors that study. And right at the beginning, all the kids, because it's a teacher in a high school, and all the kids are like, "Oh, we're Germans. We would never be that way again." Oh, really? That's what's dangerous about that. I would never do that, dude. You're not being honest with yourself, and you're not being honest with anybody else.
Well, yeah. I mean, and this is the thing, like, right? So we're both Americans, right? So, as such, we have this belief that as we have grown up, that America is the greatest country on the planet. Right, that's been kind of ingrained into our society, and so how is that any different than Nazi Germany? Right, it's in a way it's more similar than it is dissimilar, in terms of that particular aspect. And so if that's ingrained into you, the probability of you doing that evil thing is higher than it would be if you weren't growing up in Nazi Germany. At least that's the way I look at it. So
yeah, I agree.
Yeah, so that's kind of the game that I played today, and then which I always get, so people, I'm like, so on Tuesdays we have a chief officers type meeting, and so it got canceled, but our CEO is like, hey, does anyone it got canceled because of the snow, and so we were trying to focus on getting things open rather than why be in another meeting? It's more important we get things open. So he said, so the CEO says, so does anyone have anything critical other than understanding what Dan's game is all about? Right. So
Dan's game. I fucking love that, dude.
Yeah. Like, so I'm like, hey, there is a method to my madness, or at least so in my mind there is, and all will be revealed tomorrow. So when they show up, I've got the PowerPoint presentation up to kind of lead us through this and kind of give them an agenda. And so what I put in there is, what the HE, and I put 2 hockey sticks because, well, we basically, not basically, we sponsor stuff for the Islanders. So I put that in there with the Islanders stuff in there. Is Dan up to now? And so that was the thing, what the hell is Dan up to now was the title of the session. And so then we got into it and kind of led them through the rationale, the game, and why this matters, and blah blah blah. So it was fun. It was fun for me. I really should catalog all this stuff, right? And
that's actually a really good experiment, dude. Yeah. It really is.
Yeah. So I said, what if we took this out to the whole company? What would happen, right? And I believe, unfortunately, my premise would be this: the junior you are in the hierarchical structure of an organization, the probability is higher that you would form groups, cliques, and silos and echo chambers, and be more detrimental than if you were the higher you get up into the organizational structure. That would be my hypothesis. That's my hypothesis.
I agree. It'd be interesting to test it. Well, okay, so here's a little ninja Pittman trivia for you. One of the first, I used to be into collecting rare books, and this is a prior life, okay? And one of the first rare books I bought was not an original, because, man, that would be really hard and expensive and rare, but a derivative, but a really rare copy of the Malleus Maleficarum, the Hammer of the Witches, the book that the Spanish Inquisition used to test people through torture as to whether or not they were a witch. So you get some asshole like me playing this game. Does she sink or swim?
Well, I don't know if this is entirely true, but I believe it to be for some reason, because I didn't really look it up. But so I will just ask, how many witches do they burn in Salem?
How many did they burn?
Yeah.
Oh, dude, it was a really low number, if any.
I think what I remember is this: none. They drown them.
Yes, that's right.
But everyone says, "Oh, they're going to burn the witches." I'm like, no, they actually drown you because they wanted to see if you would float. Because if you floated, then you must be a witch, right? I mean, I think that's the way it went.
Yeah, fundamentally, this we're getting off on a tangent now. Fundamentally, man, once Europeans became colonialists, how the fuck you say it, in the U.S., like we stopped torturing people really bad. Dude, in Europe, there's still the Tower of London is still a monument to craven torture, dude. I mean, you want to talk about integration of shadow on a whole nother level.
Well, that's the whole
waterboarding's tame.
Yeah, that's the whole reason why people fled to America, right? They were like, we got to get out of here.
Yeah, dude.
I mean, it really was.
Yeah, it's because they were next on the witch list. That's exactly what happened. Yeah. Well, you're not the right kind of Episcopalian. You're not the right kind of Catholic. I think you're getting the pear. And if you don't know what a pear is, I'll describe it. It's a metal pear that had a screw and it would expand. And guess where they put it? Up your ass.
Not a pleasant
no,
thing.
Dude.
All right. So yeah. All right. So now getting into the other topic for tonight, which is what I think is extremely important, because I've had this debate with with plenty of people, like what's the difference between, or that there is a difference between a job and a career. And I absolutely believe that there is a difference, and I'll describe some of the things, and you tell me what you think about this. But
sure.
I think in some cases a lot of it has to do with a job. People go, oh, it's Monday, they're down. If it's a career, they're energized by the start of the work week and they're ready to go, and they want to get things done. People, when it's just a job, they're after the money. People that are in a career, they're after the experience, because that is a higher value than not. I think when people are in a job, they are doing the bare minimum to get by, to where no one really recognizes them, but also doesn't pay too much attention because work's not getting done. When it's a career, because it's your passion, you're trying to get more and more experience. The only way to do that is to go essentially above and beyond your current job description. I think people that are in a job, they tend to be, I would say, more angry because they're doing something that they basically have to do rather than want to do. And people in a career, they're energized by what they do. And I think when you look at employees, people that are in a job, they don't really care about the values of the company because that's not important to them. So they're not worried about alignment. So they will tend to be more to themselves, because again, they don't want to be noticed. They just want to do the work just enough to not have to get more work put on them, but little enough to where they're also, little enough to where they won't have more work put on them, but not enough to where people will write them up and they get on performance and value plans. If you're in a career, you're looking for companies that align with your values. And then I would say, probably to me, that the biggest part is that when you're in a job, it's more a grind, whereas if it's your career, it's a journey. And those are some of my premises of what I feel is a difference between a job and a career.
Well, it's when you hit me with this up, man, the first thing that popped in my mind is, well, first of all, yes, I agree. There's a distinct and material difference. I don't value judge it. I don't think one is better than the other, but they are different. right? I don't think men and women are better or worse, but they're different. They're not the same.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, open your eyes, people. They're not the same. Anyway, before I get myself in a lot of trouble there, the first thing I thought of is one thing I've really been digging deep down into is competence hierarchies. In terms of how do I educate or train somebody to ascend through, this is a separate conversation, but it's somewhat related, 4 steps of competence hierarchy. And the first thing I thought of was, to me, in my world, what you're talking about is the difference between an average student and a true A student. It's the same kind of argument. And here's how I break it down from my view. 100% agree with everything you said. I just have a different layer to it, right? Or a different overlay. I think of 2 models that seem to govern most human behavior, and that's Maslow's hierarchy. So I got to know that I'm getting food, and I got to know that my basic needs are met. And until those 2 things are true, I cannot ascend up the hierarchy, right? To like self-actualization and creativity and things like that. And so people that are in a job are people that have either by circumstance or choice become trapped into the first couple rungs of that hierarchy. They're just meeting their basic needs and that's it. And so they become bitter. They become miserable, right? They become very toxic because of that. Because here's the other thing I should say. This is a connection back to what we were talking about with the Christian morality code. This is where I reject original sin. And I really think by nature we're all good, right? We're all good, and we seek order out of chaos. Some of us fall short of that in various ways, but anyway, I digress. That's one part of it. And so people that are in a career, or how you recognize when you're on a career path, right, is when you're able to not only actualize being past those 2 first couple rungs, but now you're self-actualizing, you're bootstrapping yourself up, right? The other thing that seems to govern this, at least in my world, and in what you're saying and what my experience is from industry, is Bloom's taxonomy, which governs how we operate within the other hierarchy. And so this is where you get verbs like understand, evaluate, create, whatever, right? And I think that model governs how we engage the behavior that's modeled in Maslow's hierarchy. And listen, man, unless anybody gets it twisted, it is clear as day, once you're aware of these hierarchies and these models, what somebody is in. That doesn't mean you're trapped. It doesn't mean it's permanent. One can lead to the other in both directions, I would argue, right? I could be in a career and it become a job, and I could be in a job and it could become a career. True story. How I got into tech at the first startup I ever worked at was a job. I didn't like where I was at. I was stuck and I needed an escape hatch. And I happened to know somebody that was at this startup and they were hiring people for the help desk. And I'm like, you pay $25K? Because I'm only making $8 an hour. That sounds like an escape hatch to me.
They only paid you $8 an hour to hold the camera?
Hey, man. Didn't have Zoom.
Well, that's a lot of times how things happen, that things can go from job to career, right? And one of the ways in which I think it can is the moment you have a self-realization that you are now capable of climbing the ladder. And as soon as you say, I'm capable, and now you want to put that into action, that climb, that's when you start to have a career, because now you're wanting more. It just became more than just a job. Because I don't think that you can ascend to high levels of your profession, which, mind you, to me, a profession is made up of people who are both jobs and careers in a particular profession. So when you take your profession and you start, I want to ascend to as high as I possibly can in that profession, that's when it starts to become a career. And the moment that you decide, at least this is just one factor, right? There's probably multiple others that I haven't really explored just yet, but the opposite, I believe, is also true. The moment when you're in your profession where you no longer choose to ascend higher, it just became a job.
Yeah. Well, tell me if you agree with this idea. And I was just, as you were describing that, it popped into my brain. a job can be described on a trend line as flat or relatively flat over time, right? Whereas if you're on a career and it's a good career, it should be an upward slope.
Right.
Because, Mrs. Pittman and I talk about this. I don't know if we talked about this 2 weeks ago, but I told you in the pre-show that we bought a company for her. And now she's running it. She took it over this week. And we had this frank discussion about, yeah, dude, it's scary, but think about it. Louis Pasteur famously said, chance favors the prepared mind. You've prepared. You've recognized the opportunity. The hard part's done. Now you become a hero in the Jungian archetypical sense, and you seize it and you descend into chaos and create order. And to put it in that language, right? Really what that means is you engage. That it's that simple. You just engage it and you do it. You become it. And that's an upwards trend. And sure, it'll slope a little bit because you're encountering failure and adjusting and re-gauging, right? That to me is a career.
Right. Well, because you're embracing the struggle, and that struggle is what allows you to become better if you embrace that struggle, right? And this is why I've really started to think quite a bit about results. All right, so results, like people, I believe that are pursuing happiness, I think is absolutely wrong, because I think happiness is a result of things that you have done. And if you pursue happiness, then you are likely to never achieve it. If you pursue things that are meaningful, which is also why I believe a career is what people should be aspiring for, because it's meaningful, that it gives them purpose, and that purpose results in them having happiness or joy. However you want to describe that, but that's how I look at it.
Well, right, because would you agree fundamentally happiness is something we define as an attribute of something in the past? Like, I am happy because something happened. And so for me, I'd much rather be intense than happy.
Oh, yeah.
Because intensity is what, we both have a very similar background in startups and tech. I would much rather be intense because that's what's going to carry me through the shit sandwich. Not being happy.
Yeah. So check this out. Like, this is one of the discussions I was having with one of my people, right? I said, all right, so because he's like, well, hey, I like to go to the beach. I'm like, okay, great. What if every day you were just on the beach and that's all you got to do? You got to be on the beach and you got to drink a pina colada every day. At what point in time does that happiness no longer happy? Because now it's every day. And happiness being an elevated state of your norm, if that becomes your new baseline, your new normal, and therefore you would need to seek something else other than just the beach with your pina colada in order to have happiness, right? Because it's a result of works. And so that's why people do result in being happy, because they were able to afford that nice vacation, and 2 weeks a year they go to their tropical island and I'm happy. But would they be happy if that was every day of their life, that's all they did? I would argue likely not, because it would be the norm.
That's right. It gets normalized. You're absolutely correct, in my opinion. And that's what's dangerous about hinging things on post hoc attributions like happiness. Like that. It's not a state of being. I think I'm a good person. I think I'm generally joyful and positive, but that doesn't get me where I'm. Depends, bro. It depends. Like most things. Yeah, But that's not what wins the day for me. What wins the day for me, which is how I define myself as being on a career, is this trajectory, and it's the intensity that has gotten me where I'm at, not being happy.
Yeah. So I want to challenge you a little bit on something that you said.
Yeah, go ahead.
And what you had mentioned is that there's not necessarily something better than a job or a career, but yet you said you also agreed with everything that I had stated prior. And maybe you really didn't mean to say that last part, because I would go, well, why would anyone want to be miserable every day? And so if you're just in a job and you just want to do the bare minimum, which means you're not getting fulfilled, then would you still say that a job is on equal par as a career?
No, what I said was I'm not value judging it for other people. People choose to be in a job, and in my experience, they're miserable fucks.
Got it.
But they're choosing that.
Good clarification, right? Because that's a big part. Because I thought I had heard, what I had said, which is, why we do the show and clarify and continue to grow, right?
It's the whole point of discussion, right?
Yeah,
we're reasonable people and we can discuss things. And so, and to expand on that a little bit while you're pouring, what I mean by I'm not value judging them is I don't see myself, because I'm not in that situation, as being fundamentally better or worse, right? And if anything, I have an enormous amount of sadness and pity for people that are miserable. I've been in that situation. I think all of us have at some point or another.
Yeah, because there is an aspect, like I have thought about this part of it, like very similar as what I was talking about with our Nazi Germany analogy. What would it, if I were to just have a job? That job then is essentially, in my mind, the only way I could be relatively okay with that statement is that because my fulfillment is occurring through something that is not that job. Like my purpose is elsewhere. So maybe my job affords me to go do missionary work with churches every summer, and I'm able to afford to take a month off to go do that missionary work, and I wouldn't be able to do that if I didn't have that job, or maybe because it's something along those lines, because their purpose really is, hey, I'm just working so I can go do what I believe to be God's work in whatever country they're doing missionary work, and I get to take a month off every year, and so for 11 months I'm going to suffer so I can go be fulfilled for 1 month. And maybe that's the reason. That's something that, I could buy that argument.
Well, I think that I support your right as a human being, as a sovereign, conscious entity, to choose that for yourself.
Yeah. Oh, right. And so I don't want to be there to be a confusion.
Oh, I'm in agreement with you. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't want there to be confusion that I don't believe people have the right to choose which way they want to go. That's,
I don't think you said that. No, yeah. I agree with you. Yeah. And that's really what I meant by I'm not value judging it.
Yeah.
I just see a distinct and material difference. And I say it that way because I think sometimes in modern society we're caught up into, if something's different, one is good and one's bad. Life doesn't work that way, dude. Like,
no, it doesn't. And I would definitely like to talk to some other people that I've never met to determine whether or not they're satisfied with their job or career path. Because I mean, maybe it's again through my own bias that I think the career is far better, because because my career affords me fulfillment in the works that I produce, and it also affords me fulfillment in the things that are outside of my employment, of my profession, right?
You're right. So
I get both.
So let me suggest a little twist on what you just said.
Yeah.
For you, that's the little piece you missed, right? Mm-hmm. You perceive something to be better, and then just add on the for you, and fuck yeah, I agree.
Yeah, well, exactly. This is why it's for me. I think that, and this is why I think, that's why I prefer that. And again, and I agree, and I absolutely agree that if you want to choose, hey, again, that job, but then I would just to talk to the person. Then where are you getting your purpose, your fulfillment from? Because clearly it's then not from your job, because it's a means to an end, so to speak, for you. So I'm curious as to what those people's purpose, where's they getting their purpose from? What's meaning?
You're assuming they're choosing to have purpose.
Well, I would like to hope. Right?
Well, we can't all bear that burden, dude. That's a serious weight to carry.
Of course.
It really is. I mean, and this is something we've talked about with leadership, and to reiterate, I think what's a very important part about leadership, it's a choice to lead, just like it's a choice not to commit evil when you're integrated with your shadow self, right? Yeah. The only thing that stops me, and I'm being 100% serious, and I'm not hyperbolizing that I'm capable of it like in a physical sense. It's a mental state.
It's the man bun, isn't it?
Fuck yeah, dude. Look at that shit. Come on, COVID. The only thing that separates me from a serial killer is I choose not to conduct evil.
Yeah, I get that.
It's not that I lack the mental wherewithal to do that, right? And that's the integration of Jung's shadow self at its deepest level. I fully recognize that I'm capable of it. Now, listen, this is where people get it twisted. I'm not suggesting I'm going to go out and bomb people. I'm not suggesting I'm going to go out and actually strangle people. I don't know that I can physically do it. I'm talking about the mental state. And it's a choice. You integrate with your shadow self and you choose not to do that based on your recognition of what that entails. Okay? Mm-hmm. I don't spank my kid because I understand what the monster that comes out entails. And I don't have to because she understands what that means, right? You have kids, you understand it, right?
Yeah, yeah. So, all right, so could you plan the perfect murder?
Yeah. Wait, here's a better question. Have I? And the answer to that is yes.
Was it better than the, I don't know if it's right to say the protagonist in Crime and Punishment? Would he be the protagonist? I mean, it was really about him planning the perfect murder and essentially getting away from it. But I don't know if that would be considered a protagonist off the top.
Well, I mean, in the concept of a story arc, sure, yeah. I mean, even Darth Vader in some comic book is a fucking protagonist.
Yeah, I get that. So,
I mean, listen, man, I think the rebels are terrorists. I'm on the Empire, right? I mean, but anyway.
Well, yeah, there's the I don't know who said it, but essentially, it's you're either a traitor or a hero, depending on who's telling the story.
Yeah, that's right. Well, it's completely true, dude. It depends on which side of the history you're on. No, 100%, dude. I can not on this podcast, but I could detail to you blow by blow exactly what would lead to me becoming something like that. Because I've thought through it, not because I fantasize about it, not because I want to do it, but because I've actually asked myself the intellectually honest question, what would entail you becoming that and how would you carry it out? And that's why I would never do it, because I reject that evil. I make that active choice on a daily basis.
But then there is something that could cause that switch to be flipped.
Oh, yeah, for sure. 100%. Without a question.
For me, I know it 100%. And especially from the amount of work that I have done in cybersecurity when it has to deal with child pornography and child sex trafficking. Someone touches any of my kids, if something along those lines happens, I absolutely would then at that point utilize all of my skills, and that would be one of the things to me that would flip that switch 100%.
Yeah,
I have zero doubts, and I think that is the big thing, that if you were to go to any parent that loves their children, because I'm going to assume that there's probably some parents that are kind of like, well, I would hope there's none, but I'm sure there is when you take a look at the the different tails on the bell curve. But I think that is what would flip any parent to going into that mindset and then be capable of committing those things.
Right. Well, there's a really interesting descent into discussion there, because I don't know if you've ever thought about this, but when I had a kid, I became very acutely aware of the limitations of that decision. Insofar as, here's the ultimate part of it. I created something that has a definitive end. Like, that life will end just like my life will end. And you willfully put that into the world. And so for this duration of time, no matter how much we extend it, unless we make it infinite, which is maybe possible, but we're not close to that part yet, right? I'm talking about lifespan. We're going to end and our kids are going to end, and we willfully made that choice. And so in this time of span, I want to do whatever I can to maximize their to put it in your parlance, happiness, their potential in the world, right? I want to pre-potentiate them to ascend up this hierarchy. And so when I perceive, this is very acute for me. I don't know if you had this as a father. I did, and I didn't understand it right away. I'll give you a very clear example. There was a time where I thought Mrs. Pittman was not handling a situation correctly physically, and I thought she was being too rough, and I had a very momentary violent reaction to it mentally, right? And in that moment, that's the integration of self, right? In that moment, I recognized where that monster was coming out, and I put a stop to it, right? People that don't integrate won't stop it because they don't understand the potential of it or for it or to it or however you want to say it, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so to the point where we've had friends that did some of this work, and I've had to tell them, I can't be your friend anymore because you persist in talking about your work and I can't hear it because I'm going to have a violent reaction to it. Now, this is where it separates the people that understand shadow and the people that don't. I'm not convinced that I'm going to go around and actually punish people, like physically, right? My mental state of wanting to is divorced from my physical capability of actually carrying it out. And that's why I'm interested in talking about at this level to people that clearly can carry it out because they did, and how they perceive that argument. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, sure. Now I wonder, today, could they still carry it out?
Yeah, dude. Yeah. I have no doubt in my mind they could.
Do you think it's like Rambo? It's never leaves. Do you see the last Rambo movie?
I did, man. It was glorious.
I thought it was probably, like, to me, the first one and the last one, like, the last one I thought was pretty, from the story, was pretty on par with the first one. The other, the ones in the middle, garbage.
They were entertaining as I ate a handful of popcorn, but that's the extent. The first and the last, you're spot on. I totally agree with you, man, and it speaks to this. If you really look at how Rambo as a character has integrated his shadow, the first and the last are raw. And I watched that last one. I'm like, yes, that's exactly what I perceive myself as being capable of mentally. Again, not physically, right?
Yeah. Now, so I can't remember in that last movie, that was his stepdaughter?
Yes.
Yeah.
Or adopted daughter. Right.
Basically something like that. And his wife passed and, and she basically gets, kidnapped, and that brought him back out to John Rambo.
Oh, the monster will wake.
Yeah.
There's always the dragon. And so that what defines in Jung's hierarchy this concept of the hero. It's the hero that descends into darkness to slay the dragon. Willfully makes that choice. And so you understand this too from martial arts because what we're talking about is order and chaos or yin and yang, right? It's all integrated across mythologies. And so I've always described it as I understand exactly what my triggers are to the point where I understand what the behavioral patterns that would emerge from those triggers would be. And it for me, it's on the level of I'm not going to hurt the person that hurt somebody, to put it in that idea. Everybody's getting punished. There's unlimited potential at that point because that's how deep that shadow runs for me, right? Now that part of that's my background, right?
Yeah. So I would say, kind of following along with that, just so people understand, like, so from my background and my study of martial arts, order, chaos, yin yang, and this is very, very, very important for people to understand. Many people think yin yang are opposites, and I completely disagree. They are two distinct objects that are working in a common goal, and you need both in order to unleash your true power, which is why I believe when order and chaos, so to speak, in the same thing, when they can work in conjunction.
That's right.
And when it does, it's extremely powerful.
That's exactly how Jung defined it.
Yeah. It's and so getting into that, getting into so people understand. So in martial arts, you can basically describe like an open hand attack being yin, which is female. A closed fist is yang, like that punch, right? But there's a problem with this punch, and so for the people who don't know, like when you're looking at it from here, the weak point is the wrist, right? So this is really the part of your power into that aspect. Now, if I can combine yin into this, which would be like here, so now I'm going to strike someone, which is still that yang, like with the edge. My power point becomes here to here, and that just becomes physics. I've added that much more stability into that, and that's why you'll see in many martial arts movies, it's not so much the fist, it's when they're hitting, that's like, you'll see the palm, and that whole aspect of Bruce Lee with his touch. I mean, it's that palm aspect because of where the power points are, and that's extremely powerful if you can pull it off. I mean, that's
well, and that's like in Tai Chi, you have hard and soft styles.
Yeah,
it's an expression of that, and Jung talked extensively about that. In terms of how to integrate shadow and what it means to recognize the monster within yourself. And people have to understand the ramification of that. I'm not exaggerating. I'm talking about total chaos.
Oh, yeah.
Eternal darkness.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? And so that, again, I have to emphasize this, right? I'm talking about a mental state, not a physical act necessarily. I listen, man, I've never killed anybody. I have no idea if I can physically kill somebody. I think I probably could physically. I mean, I'm not a weak person, as Ian found out. I remember him yelling out, his core is so strong.
Yeah.
Dude, what do you think squats get you?
Well, dude, you're built like a dwarf.
Well, shit, man. I'm working on the beard again. I showed baby Pittman all those photos from when I lived in Maryland.
Yeah.
Got long as hell. And she's like, dude, you need that. I'm like, you're right. What I need back is a fucking extra half hour every morning this semester. Thank you.
Yeah. It's really interesting to me that, and so I'll have to back up. So this is when we talk about like security awareness training, and every corporation is on this big kick, and I really sometimes struggle with that because, well, the reason why you and I were in cybersecurity had done so well was not so much that we were necessarily just more talented with scripting or networking or whatever, right? It wasn't it. Is that we spent and really in that case the time in the shadow, right? So for me, in dealing a lot more on that Intel side of the house, I had to spend a lot of time thinking like a bad person.
Right.
And that's difficult. That's why it's so difficult for a regular person to do shadow work, because they're not mentally strong enough to deal with seeing the depths of what they are potentially capable of in the event the dragon has to come out. And
that's right.
that can really break someone's psyche. Like they will have a mental breakdown if they spend too much time in it. And so it's not so much that, you and I and people like TK are better. We trained ourselves. It's a mental training that has gone place over time. There is no way possible that when I was starting off at Homeland Security that I could ever have imagined then what I know now. And if I tried to if I could get to the point where what I know now back then, I wonder if it would have broke me.
Yeah, sure. Right.
And I think it might have.
That's an intellectually honest position. And so this is kind of going back to your idea and question about job versus career. The people that I've interacted with, the first Mrs. Pittman is a perfect case study of this, right? She was perfectly happy being a jobber. It was her existence. She went in at 9.
She was a professional wrestler?
No. She worked in the medical insurance industry.
Yeah. Well, so for those that don't,
all jobbers.
Yeah. So for those that don't know, at one point in time, actually still, we're fans of Ric Flair, and so in the WWE type thing, a jobber is a person that's basically going to lose every time. Like it's there to help get someone, ring time. They're on their way. They're not that good. So that's why I kind of mentioned the jobber.
Listen, and in case nobody understands the point of my analogy there is she's the ex Mrs. Pittman, so thus she lost out.
Yeah. So you remember when so the last time I went to RSA and I called that guy an effing jobber?
Yeah. Yes.
Red team jobber is what I called him.
Yeah. And so listen, bless her heart. Okay. I hardly ever talk about her. I don't think anybody knows her name because that's how much I talk about her. She was perfectly happy going in at 9, doing her function until 5, and coming home, and that was her existence. She was perfectly happy. She was not a miserable person necessarily. But what I realized is that that wasn't the existence I needed to fulfill my purpose as I perceived it for me, which is why she's the ex-Mrs. Pittman, right? I have no idea what she's doing now. I haven't talked to her probably in 10 years. I have no idea.
Well, there's a big reason why you don't have to.
Well, yeah, I didn't have kids with her. Right? I mean, that made it nice and easy, to be fair.
Absolutely it does, right? And so, we have very similar, and this is the reason why, my Mrs. Ford is that way and not an ex Mrs. Ford, because I wonder, I honestly do wonder if in many cases, and I'm really glad that it's happened in this day and age rather than when I was younger, because I was certainly I made different decisions when I was younger, and I was striving for a particular goal, which resulted in me not having a fulfillment outside of my profession. I mean, that was kind of all encompassing. And now that's different. Like I am much more fulfilled today than what I was with either of my previous marriages.
My life is indubitably better. I say that and people might misunderstand. I don't regret a single decision I've made. Not a single one.
No, I don't regret.
And I would never go back and change any of it.
No, I couldn't. I've thought about this a lot. Extensively a lot. And you and I have had these conversations. I mean, it's I would not the reason why I am where I am today is because of all of those decisions that I made. Now, would I have a lot more money in my bank account if I had not been divorced and had kids? Right? Absolutely. But would I be as fulfilled? And I think the answer would be no. I think the answer is no. Well, I am fairly certain the answer is no. I would not be fulfilled if I had changed any of those past decisions.
And so I'll put this back into if we agree on that trend line conversation, right? I'm convinced that I've made over the net all the correct decisions at the critical moments, because I really feel like I'm on the cusp of fully realizing unlimited, and I mean that literally, unlimited potential, limitless potential. I don't know what the cap is anymore. Dude, listen, man, like, I don't know how much more I can take on. And there seems to be no ceiling to it. I just keep adding stuff and doing it and building more, and it just keeps ramping up. Unlike GameStop stock. That's a whole other conversation, but
but there's a good point to that, right? And there's a big reason. We've talked about this, on here, and when we did This Life in Tech, that the reason why we can say that the more we know, the more we realize we don't know, because that fire that builds, the outlying of that fire is the more and more things that we don't know. And so as we know, though, we can keep building that fire bigger.
Yeah.
And we can make that fire do several things. We can make it be fulfilling and help us to cook our food and keep us warmth, or it can burn the entire world.
That's right. And that's the dragon coming out. Or, we talked about this a little bit. And so to put it in a particular person's view of competence hierarchies, Jordan Peterson's view of this, you can agree or disagree, but the guy has a psychological point that's scientifically based. Okay. You can agree or disagree, but
before you say, I will tell you that he is so fast at making his logical arguments and brilliant at using, and people have to pay very specific to some of his language. And when I mean specific, because he really does. And people who have not been trained, whether through academia or not, he says, and some of his words are almost exactly like this: the research does or does not indicate what you just said, right? He's not saying it is flawless. He's saying that has never been performed. Therefore, I cannot give you a proper assertion because the
Right.
research does not indicate, or the research does indicate, and he's very clear about that.
Well, and so one of the things he talks a lot about is the idea of social hierarchies arranged by competence. And
Yeah.
listen, man, if you go look at the research, you can verify what he's saying or not verify. Okay, I've looked at it; it's verified. And so there's this idea, and this comes from Jung's psychological research, which was scientific, that you have these characters. The archetype of this manifested in mythology is Marduk from Babylon. Okay, that you sometimes have these characters or these archetypes that can transcend hierarchies to the point where they can dynamically slot themselves into various hierarchies because they're no longer bound to a single hierarchy. And so when I talk about limitless potential, that's what I'm talking about. To put it in like Jordan's or Joseph Campbell's, where that comes from, the hero myth, in a mythological sense. That's the archetype I'm talking about. And I really, for a long time, man, I've talked about this idea of the star arc. And I can't describe, it makes me cry a little bit when I think about it. The extreme sadness I felt a couple of years ago when I realized that not everybody can get on the star arc. I can't save everybody. Not me as a person, but this idea, right? And then I realized, well, that's not the point of it. The point of it is to maximize the amount of people that wake up and realize that they actually are capable of unlimited potential. You can become anything you want.
They've been properly red-pilled.
If you want to put it in that idea, sure.
Yeah.
I don't think it's a bad analogy, to be honest with you.
I of course I don't think it's a bad analogy because I said it. So
look at that, we agree.
So it's funny because this is a big. So all right. So for those who don't know how I got back on this Jordan Peterson kick, because I had read his books years ago, but it came about because honestly, and I'm being extremely honest about this statement, because it was only recently where I had actually heard this aspect of critical race theory, and I had to research it. Okay, I'm like, what is like the, and I honestly feel like when I read that book, I lost some IQ points. Okay, it is the absolute worst thing I've ever read. From a scientific standpoint, the mere fact to say that individual stories are more relevant and have significance over science, because science is only the benefit of the West. I go, it was hard for me to read this whole book because it was just filled with so many straw man like arguments like that have no foundation of any scientific framework, academic framework that you do. And that's why it was essentially, in my opinion, self-published. It was done not under an aspect of anything in when we talk about seminal knowledge, right? And you and I know this, that there's seminal knowledge. When people start writing research, they reference this book. There was no research really done in that book. And so that led me over the past 18 months back to Jordan Peterson, who, for those that don't know, he is a clinical psychologist. His PhD is from somewhere in Canada, which is a very highly respected university. I can't remember which one it is. He was a professor at Harvard. Okay, so you don't get to be a professor at Harvard for being a slouch. Like it's just not going to happen.
Right. Yeah,
okay,
right.
And now he's at University of Toronto, which is also a pretty well respected university in the world as a full-time faculty, and he's not going anywhere, right? His research is in like identity, like that is like one of his specialties, and he breaks down why critical race theory is garbage, why white privilege. He's like, you could say, he goes, really, and actually I'd be curious as to what you think about this, and maybe you agree or disagree, but one of his points, in which I actually do believe, it's not so much that it's white privilege, it's that it's majority privilege. If you're in China, then it's your, of a particular aspect of Chinese privilege. If you are in Japan, it's Japanese privilege. If you're in America, it just so happens to be that we're still predominantly Caucasian, right? So, it's whoever's in power, whichever particular thing is in power is the one that's got the privilege. And we all have some type of unique privileges over someone else. And so when you break it down to the very basic of the self, every single person has some advantage over someone else in some particular, attribute.
Well, of course. Like, some people run faster than other people. Like, that's the trap of that argument.
Yeah.
Is the argument wants to force you into a position where you have to deny what's obviously true.
Yeah.
And then they got you. And this is why the answer to me is, like, how do you ignore the obviousness of that?
Well, because people want to, and here's a great thing,
right? Exactly.
They want
to. There's an agenda,
right? So, are you prejudiced?
What do you mean by that? Am I prejudiced?
Yeah, take it for whatever you want.
Well, no, I'm not going to take it for what I want because I don't know what you mean.
Are you prejudiced?
No.
So, I would argue that you are, for a very distinct fact that you have Mrs. Pittman. You have chosen her and rejected all others because of your choice, and that's a form of prejudice.
Let me stipulate an adjustment to your statement. I've rejected all that I've experienced.
Well, however you want to say it, but I mean, but this is why people.
Wait, I hope she's not watching, dude.
Well, because preference is a form of prejudice, and that's, I'm not saying, because you're not doing it necessarily because of, that of an ethnicity or a religion or something. This is who you prefer as your partner, and therefore no one else is that partner.
Well,
right?
And so that's the twisted part of how we use these terms, and
yeah.
that's what that extremism perverts.
Yeah.
Is this idea of, here's the perfect example. I had this conversation with a group of people in a class. And I'll do this because, well, what are you going to do? Fire me for talking about it? I'll go work for my friend Dan and triple my salary. Fuck you. Right? I mean, I don't give a fuck. So I'll talk about what I think is interesting and matters to people that are young, that are going out into the world and becoming something. I'm not colorblind. And that doesn't mean I'm racist. I recognize that you're brown. I can fucking see it, dude. Look, what am I going to lie to you and tell you I can't see that you're different than me? That's not the problem. The problem are the assholes that will work towards putting you into a lower bracket in the hierarchy based solely on your color. That's the problem. Attack that.
Yeah. Well, because I mean, here's the thing with all of it. And this is why we have so few leaders overall, right? Mm-hmm. There's only, whether or not we want to, we'll just say, for the sake of argument, if you're a CEO, you should be a leader. And so for the sake of this argument, you are, right? So that's just setting that up. There's only 500 CEOs in the Fortune 500.
Right.
How many junior analysts across all disciplines exist in that Fortune 500?
I don't know. What is it? Like a times 20?
Tens of thousands.
Right.
If not hundreds of thousands, because how many people does the Fortune 500 employ? A lot, right? So I don't know. I haven't done that research, but the point of that is, well, I mean, they should also be a leader, but they're taking the direction from their leader, the CEO. So when we expand it out to underserved communities, which is where I really prefer to keep my thoughts, because the underserved at any moment, depending on where you exist in the geography, could be of any ethnicity.
Yeah, sure.
Right?
Right.
If you are in, Abilene, it's predominantly poor white people. If you're in Abilene, Texas, so to speak. Mm-hmm. What is the? I'll have to look at the movie that came out. That it was a great book, got great reviews. But then it became a Netflix movie, and now everyone says it sucks because it's about some it's like something effigy. I'll have to look up. But anyway, again, it's predominantly, and they say like, oh, these are a bunch of hillbillies in, the mountains, and their votes shouldn't count, so to speak. Well, they're also underserved. Like the median income in that area is like 20 grand. Right. And so, and as you've talked about before, which is absolutely 100% true. So for people that do not know this, IQ is the number one predictor of future success.
Yeah.
100%. And for those that also and the research is, as far as I'm concerned, concluded in this. Like there's nothing been able to be a better indicator of predicted future success than IQ.
And it has been for a long time. It's not like in the last 5 years.
Right. It's like settled to me, right? So here's another thing. Across men and women, IQs are nearly identical everywhere in the world. Like there's no difference.
Once you get into like your mid 20s,
there's no difference. So this is with that, where I was going. Well, if this is true, there's still also likely people that have an IQ that's higher than 82, and I use 82 specifically because that's the lowest IQ you can have to serve in the U.S. military.
That's right. That's absolutely fucking spot on correct.
All right. And so what's the average IQ?
100.
100, right? So
it's 100.
So, I'm willing to bet in these underserved communities, regardless of what ethnicity someone is, you're likely to come out with the average of 100, and you're likely to have a number of people in those underserved communities that are higher than 100. I don't know what the percentage is. I haven't done the research, but I go, well, that would be more probable than not. So, isn't it better than to this is like, if we take this to the sports analogy, if I'm a college recruiter, I want to look for some of those, if I'm like the NCAA football or basketball or whatever, I want to go where other people aren't to see if I can find someone that hasn't recruiting that to go there. If I'm an NFL scout, I want to go to some of these colleges that may not be Division I, which I might be wrong on this, but for some reason I don't think I am. But I don't think Jerry Rice was a Division I college football player. I'll have to look that up. And the reason why I bring him up is he is considered by many to be the greatest football player of all time.
Look it up, because I got to take care of something.
All right. I will look this up. So to find out, and people can kind of follow along these lines, but Jerry Rice College. Let's see. And I say this because I honestly believe that regardless of where we go in society, we're going to find people that are amazing. We'll find people that are great. We'll find people that are good. We'll find people that are average. We'll find people that are less than average. We'll find people that are low average, and we'll find people that are of IQs that are less than 82, and that it doesn't really matter where we are. Our job as leaders is to find the people that can make a difference and that we can make a difference in. And I think that is, that is one of the, beautiful things about, being in leadership. And, we absolutely can take that to an extent of being, good or bad, just like in everything else. And I don't know if the ninja's back yet or not. I just looked it up. It is a NCAA 2A. So I was correct in that it is not a 1A. It was a 2A. So,
well, and so to your point, I this is the problem I have with all this is people that are being extreme in their ideology confuse equality and opportunity with equality and outcome.
Oh yeah, and that's why I am a huge proponent of diversity and inclusion. I am not when you say equity.
Yeah, that's right. That's a good distinction, in my opinion.
Yeah, equity means equal outcome, and
how could you ever guarantee that?
It's boring. It's boring. It's absolutely boring. I mean,
well, wait, but this is the problem with intersectionality: is you cannot, by definition, agree it because you can continue to bisect the intersectionality.
it's a
You can
it's a
just
bi-
keep
it's
going.
like the bivariate problem, right?
Well, it's the difference between
Oh,
integers
no,
and real numbers.
it's a multivariate. Not
That's
bi,
right.
multivariate. Sorry.
That's right. That's right. And so you can continue to identify these group attributes based on, let's say, color, attitude, speech pattern, origin, whatever, right? And it's never ending. It just descends into
Right.
madness. And
Right.
this is the problem I've had.
You came from a single parent, or both your parents are together. Your
you're
parents
mixed race.
Yeah.
You're from the south, the north. Dude, it doesn't stop. This is the problem I have.
It's unlimited.
And this is the problem I have with this. Is I want to live in a society that rewards competence at various levels, right? And people working hard to their capacity to ascend that model. I do not want to live in a society that rewards a race to who has been disadvantaged or who has suffered the most. That is incredibly dangerous.
It is. It absolutely is. And this is why I say in these things that there's three parts to the equation. Most people only focus on the outcome, and that is wrong. That's absolutely wrong, because an outcome is, by definition, a result of your action. So with that, I believe the piece that people are missing in this whole thing, because at least in this country and many places that would be considered the West, we are afforded equal opportunity. We are not afforded equal outcome. And the piece that's in the middle is access. And this, I believe, is what the real problem is in the West, that not everyone is afforded equal access. And that's a real problem, because then when you get to some of those places that I was talking about, regardless of ethnicity, think about as today, as COVID, they're likely not having the capability to do online learning, right? Their internet access may barely even support a video chat. They may not even, the school systems themselves may not even have Chromebooks or something along those lines for them to do it, right? And it's and their internet capabilities for the families are like I said, even if they're there, they may not be able to afford that. I mean, I don't know how much do you spend for your internet a month?
Oh shit, dude! It's probably around $100.
I think I'm around 150. For where I'm at, right?
I would guess that's average for a mid to high tier package.
Think about how much food that can buy someone in one of these underserved communities. All right. So if you're making a choice,
now you're back to Maslow's hierarchy.
Right. And this is why my premise, and people have, criticized me for saying this, and I still stand by it. I think the minimum wage is absolutely garbage. I think labor unions are absolute garbage. But I absolutely believe that the government should fill in the gap of whatever your wage is to whatever the living wage should be for the area that you are in. And so, because again, I would go, well, hey, if you're in one of these underserved communities and all of a sudden we artificially say that everyone there is going to make $15 an hour, where in some of these places where the average median or the median income's, but it's not bad. It's not good to say average median. It's the same thing. The median income, if the median income is 20 grand a year and I just artificially inflated that to essentially 30, well, now we've just completely changed the entire dynamic, and that's not necessarily good. I would say that it's not, because it was freely given, and things that are freely given, people tend to take for granted. That's just, human nature. Oh, I didn't pay for that. And they don't worry. So I think the government should step in, because and should check the employer, right? So if the average median income for a florist that just started off is $6 an hour and you're paying them $4, well, why? Okay, sorry, we've seen that the actual median income is $6. So you should be paying $6. I mean, that's just the right thing to do. But if we think that $15 an hour is that living wage, which people would be wrong, it's actually $16.70. If you in terms of what the average is from that, then the government should step in and fill that gap for the employer, because we don't want people, as you've mentioned with Maslow's hierarchy, worrying about where they're getting their food from.
Exactly. That's it. I want us to live in a society where nobody has to worry about the first couple tiers, right? I don't remember it off the top of my head, but it's 2 or 3 tiers,
right?
Where it's like shelter, food, basic necessities, right? Nobody should ever have that concern, ever. Not in a first world superpower. We are the most powerful country on this planet. I can't believe in the 21st century we have to talk about this. Honestly, right?
Yeah, I get it. So check this out. All right. So I'm gonna say why this is even more important, because one, that I think that gives people more of a carrot, and if they figure out that their job can turn into a career, they'll exceed beyond 15 an hour much more quickly if they don't have to worry about some of their basic needs that we've talked about in Maslow's hierarchy. Now, but here's where the beautiful part comes in, and this is some research that I've been doing recently, in that what we have found is that once people's basic needs are taken care of, and then they don't have to worry about the bill collectors constantly calling for them, then they care about the environment. And that is the number one thing that will turn our world around from those that, which I believe climate change is absolutely occurring. So that is the number one predictor of how to reverse those effects, is by getting people to the part in Maslow's hierarchy where as soon as they get to a point where they don't have to worry about the bill collectors calling them, then they're able to afford to care about the environment.
Imagine that, dude. The fucking hierarchy works. Some asshole came up with a model that actually describes human behavior.
Yeah.
Like, wow. Well, and to your point, I do absolutely agree that however this universal income, guaranteed minimum income manifests, that's not minimum wage, I think it should absolutely be evaluated on a state-by-state basis. Here's the perfect proof of it, dude. I took a significant pay cut to go from California to North Carolina. But I actually make more money because I save more money living here just based on the cost of living compared to Southern California. Not all states are created equally, and thank the founders for rigging up this system, because they shouldn't be. You have choice. You have no restriction of what state you choose. Do you remember me telling you that I would never fly through Charlotte?
Oh, yeah, I do. I remember this.
Because the state voted to ban gay marriage. And I said, and this is before even I started dating Mrs. Pittman, I will never fly through Charlotte. I will never do it because I don't support that. Guess what? I ended up here. Part of the reason why I agreed to do it is because the state reversed its decision.
Well, let's be honest. You're not in Charlotte.
Well, I'm not.
And so you still don't have to fly through Charlotte.
Well, right now I don't have to fly anywhere. But right to the point, that's one of the beauty that to me is one of the pinnacle beauties of the way this environment in our society in the West, in the United States of America, is rigged up, is you have choice. And what I'm interested in knowing is where somebody thinks they don't have equal opportunity or equal access, because that's what I want to solve.
Yeah, because that can result in a better outcome for that individual.
That's right. That's right.
Pure and simple. So, all right. So I got one last question for you, as we've been on this kind of track before we close this up. All right. So let's say for whatever reason, you never met Mrs. Pittman, or something unfortunately bad happened to her, and so she's not in the picture. So therefore, it is completely as if you are being fully honest with everyone out there. How do you feel about people that would, or actually before that, would you involve yourself romantically with a transsexual female?
Yeah. Sure.
What do you think about the people who would say that if you're not willing to, then you're transphobic?
Uh, what do I think about the people that think that?
What do you think that statement?
I think it's nonsensical. That's what I think. I think it's completely divorced from reality. I don't know why anybody well, no, that's not true. I do know why people think that. It's because they don't have anything better to think about. I mean, so if you talk about prejudice and preference, that this cuts to the heart of one example of it, right?
Yeah.
I've just like your question about Auschwitz, this is a question I've actually thought about. I'm not going to get into what led to thinking about it. Okay. But
hey, it's just between you and I.
Hey, listen, man, I worked in Hollywood. Leave it at that.
Yeah.
I've imagined scenarios in which I would be in a situation in which I was with somebody romantically and discovered that they were some version of post-op. I don't know how to describe that because I'm not really tuned into it, but that's the only way I know how to describe it with my vocabulary. And I've thought about the ramifications of that. And at least in my thinking, well, look, man, if I like you, I like you. There's nothing more to it than that, right? You can call it whatever you feel like, but that's on you, not me. And so I refuse to extend other people the power to govern how I behave myself. I'm a sovereign entity in this universe. That's it.
Right. So do you think you would involve yourself with that person if you knew they were a transsexual female? Up front? Yeah.
Like I read it like on a bio and I'm choosing between bios, or I'm with that person and I'm feeling a connection and then I discover it, because those are two different circumstances.
No, right. The former. The they are you meet a person for the first time and they're essentially like, hey, just so you know, I'm transsexual.
To give you an honest answer, I'd have to evaluate it on that basis. Like how I feel is, if I feel connection to somebody, I feel connection to somebody. I don't know that at that point I'm really going to care about much else.
Well, right, and that's I've thought about this as well, just because I know that when people, because I think people are very, very wrong for saying this. It does not mean you are, in my mind, that you are transphobic and against the LGBTQ plus people if you prefer to be with someone that is, whatever you're attracted to. Like, that is, I don't find that to be a problem, as long as those people,
of course not.
Right? I think that that extremes is what's going on, is people are saying, well, if you're not willing, then you are against this community. That's not true. I think that's bad. I think it's dangerous.
Well, and so, look, man, let me give you an extreme example. I am not willing to let another man have sex with me in my ass. That doesn't make me anti-gay. That means I don't want that. And so here's the thing to twist around. If I don't want that and you're telling me I should, you're an ableist for rape. You're a participant in rape culture.
Absolutely. No means no. Period. Pure and simple. Like what I've had to tell my boys, especially, is you're going to be in a situation where you're going to be on a date with a young lady and things might get romantically charged. No means no. It means full stop. It does not mean try again later. It means no, full stop. Period.
Well, because that's the safe position, and I think it's intelligently rational. Because if you have a connection with that person, you're going to meet them again, and that opportunity is going to come back again when everybody's in the right frame of mind. And so here's the extreme example, okay? So I was, and still am to some degree, deathly allergic to cow milk, to the point where I have never in my life, not once, ever consumed a glass of cow milk. Ever.
How about goat?
No. I haven't. I've never tried it. That doesn't mean I wouldn't, but that's a different conversation.
Mrs. Pittman?
Okay.
I'm just looking to see how far I could go, right?
Hey, man, I'm playing the game. That doesn't make me anti-cow.
No.
I don't have a problem with cows. It means I'm not going to drink the milk because I personally find it not for me.
Yeah.
I don't have to define it past that.
No,
and
you
fuck
don't.
you, not you, but society for trying to make me.
I know. I mean, it's and that is the thing that, like, right. So I think that the basic aspect of what you said was, do I know about it up front or do I know about it after? Right? Because if I know,
I might have a different reaction.
Right. In the event that, hey, I might be just hanging out with a bunch of friends that are at parties, and this individual might be there, and I have no reason to suspect something. And again, I don't have my missus; it's never in the picture, and I would like to believe I might be like, well, okay, but I don't. I honestly, I probably think I would eventually be turned off. I don't think I could, just because, hey, I prefer women. I guess just what it is. Not that maybe not that person wasn't really nice, but once I would be like, oh well, okay, that's not for me. Doesn't mean that there's other people that person is not for. It doesn't mean that person is not a good person. Just not for me.
It's not a value judgment.
Yeah, it's not value judgment.
No, and so on the opposite end of the spectrum, because I've thought about this, I'm being 100% open and honest. Listen, man, at some point I'm like Barnabas Collins. I just want to sling. You dig what I'm saying?
Oh yeah.
And if I feel connection with anybody, that is how I for me in my life evaluate that situation.
I get it.
And I'm not value judging it past that. And I refuse to let anybody tell me how I should value judge myself. I'm not value judging you. You go do you. And I say that somewhat restrictively because I hate saying it. But whatever makes you happy, I recognize your sovereignty to live your life the way you choose to. And unless you're harming somebody else that's not consenting, I don't have a problem with it. I have a problem with it when you're harming somebody that's not consenting. That's it. It's very clear. It's very simple.
Right. And this is, I mean, it is very simple to me. Just as you said, if you are consenting and you're an adult, and I think that's a huge distinction. You have to be an adult.
That's right.
I don't care what you do. I honestly don't.
And I don't want to know about it. It's none of my business.
Yeah.
That's like the purest libertarian approach to it, right? It really is.
It is. And you're right. It is, which is why I always kind of, poke the bear in your spirit journey on why you think privacy must die. And if you haven't caught Dr. Pittman's book, it's pretty good. There are some things that we talked about it on one of the shows, like, hey, there's some people I'm like, all right, look, I think you're a little bit off here, but you wrote it in such a way, right? You wrote it to go, this is my stuff, please. Like, the only way we get better is to stand on the edge of who we are and honest as to who we are in our ethics, our morals, our code of honor, whatever that might be, and allow people to attack that so we can, and that's the steel man aspect, because we've done this quite a bit of how I'm going to perfect my own arguments and improve myself to not get caught by that fiery dart the next time, because I've now improved it. And because I remember some of the LinkedIn comments that you got, and I'm like, some of them, I was like, you clearly do not understand what's going on here, right? This is a thought-provoking premise that you don't necessarily have to agree with, but you should understand those core concepts as to why it must. And to me, my steel man of your premise on why privacy must die is that we are wasting too much energy in trying to make something private that is not any realms of possibilities close to being guaranteed to remain private, and that is wasted energy that we could be using to progress humans to the next evolution.
Yeah, well said. And I would point out, nowhere in that book and nowhere in anywhere I've ever talked about it, private or public, have I ever said, fuck you, I'm right.
Well, that part's not true. Maybe not about your book, but
Well, yeah. Right? I mean, but this is the point. You have to dare to speak what you think.
you have to. That's really the basic premise of free speech. Okay,
That's right.
because free speech is part of our free thought, and we need people to counter our free speech to help us progress.
Yeah.
Like that, and people don't understand that. They really
No.
don't. And it's so very important that free thought and bring that out so people can help you be better. And then thank them for helping you be better, right? And
That's right.
And that's why, that's my Steelman argument of your thing, even though I partially disagree with that, because I think it depends on what. And I think that's the really key difference to me. What I want to keep private. Certain things I don't care about. Other things I care about a little bit. And there are few things I care about immensely. And those things that I care about immensely are where I will focus my efforts on trying to remain private, because that's what the parts that's not, and which is just slightly turning your statement. Not all privacy must end. The privacy pieces that are not that extreme importance to who you are as a family, yourself, whatever, should die, because you still gain significant energies back to where you can be assisting humans to that next evolution, right? That's how I twist that. Turn it slightly 2%.
Yeah, sure. Hey, look, man, I might be totally wrong. All I know is I thought about that for a couple of years. We talked about it
several years.
Yeah, it did. It took me several years to fully develop that line of thinking. And I thought, well, I mean, fuck it, man. Maybe one day in the future, somebody will benefit from this. I have no idea. Maybe not. It doesn't matter. I don't care. I think, dude, listen, that book's been for sale on Amazon for several years. I think I've made $60.
Dude, you want to know?
I don't care.
So check this out. I've made $5.72 so far. My podcast,
dude. That's $5.70 more than we ever made off this Life in Tech. But the point is that this is the thing people have to understand. And this is what defines. Maybe this is the closing moment. The difference between a job and a career. A career isn't towards an end. It's momentum that is just gathering steam towards something, and that something doesn't have to be defined.
Yeah,
right,
absolutely true. And that's the thing. Like when people, I say this laughingly, because you and I started This Life in Tech back in 2014, I think. Okay.
Yeah.
And you had some things that went on to where you could no longer do that on a continuous basis, and maybe it comes back, maybe it doesn't. Who knows? We don't know what the future may exist. But we're able to share some time on here. But we did it not for money. We did it because, well, that was a good way for us to maintain our network, right? Our social capital is a way that
it keeps you and I connected. We got TK involved in it. I love how you've taken that concept and transcended into EchelonOrchid. I really do. I really admire it. You've really taken it to a whole nother fucking level, dude, than I was ever willing and capable of, if I'm being honest.
Well, I don't know.
And I admire that.
I don't think the capable part's right. You had other things that you wanted to spend your energy on. And
well,
fair enough.
Let's call it capacity, right? Okay.
Yeah.
But to me, it's just a natural evolution of that career trajectory versus a job trajectory. Had we both treated it as a job, we wouldn't be having this conversation right now.
No. This is, and I mean, and largely, when I first started doing EchelonOrchid, I had and I still, I like the character aspect of things, and but I started to look at it, I was like, okay, well, I should have a little bit more concepts, because at one point it actually just started feeling like a job, and I couldn't do it. I had to take a little bit of a break, because I'm like, wait a minute, this isn't what I wanted. Like I wanted this to have some meaning to basically capture my evolution of thought It's just almost like my journal or a diary of my thoughts.
Yeah.
And I'm comfortable in sharing that with whomever, and whomever can say good, bad, whatever. Just like Michael Jordan, I don't necessarily read all the comments, So, but for those that I matter, I do. And so I had to rethink. And so I was like, okay, well, what do I enjoy? Well, I enjoy coffee on a Sunday morning, and I enjoy whiskey almost every day. So why not have something, and let's have some fun over the two things that I enjoy. And then I will, my goal, and I'm not making a steadfast goal, is to try to do one recorded session a week, or have one interesting guest that is not a regular like you and TK to continue some of the other things because then as I learn from them, then I get to test out my new things on UNTK and continue to, evolve my argument of
you're right.
me becoming better.
100% agree, man. 100% agree. It's just the natural evolution of things.
Yeah. And it came down to this, quite simply. By doing it this way, it is very fun for me. And
that's what matters.
Quite frankly, that's actually the only thing I care about. I mean, I would like other people to have fun with it too. And I would love to have, millions of subscribers and all this. But hey, I've got, I don't know, 118, 120 some subscribers, and cool. Where I get pretty close to like 1,000 views, averaging I dropped down to a little bit less than 17 minutes here recently, but I was hovering at that 17-minute mark, which is really quite good when you're talking about it. So, I feel pretty good about those things. I've learned a lot about search engine optimization and why that matters. I mean, I can get, without really trying to do any type of promotion, I'll get 100 views just based on the SEO. And it's and that doesn't cost anything. That's just that. And the more times people see it, it picks up, it changes those algorithms, blah, blah, blah. But anyway, I know you have to teach class early in the morning. You've got a job that you have.
I have an obligation.
Yeah.
Based on a prior choice.
Yeah. That's contractually written for, for a little.
Funny how that cuts both ways.
Exactly. Well, my friend, I appreciate you coming on again and helping to evolve. Hopefully it's always mutually beneficial, but to
100%.
Evolve my thinking and becoming a better human to support other humans. And it doesn't mean I'm against animals. It just means that animals aren't all that sentient, and I don't think that they can help me progress with my career. But I'm sure someone might actually say, "Oh, so you're against animals?" Well, I don't think a kangaroo can do computer programming. If they could, I would try, but I don't think they can. But on another thing, we should probably talk about how the Neuralink went into, I think, an orangutan.
Yes, and listen, man, we should. Next week, I'm available if you are.
Yeah.
We should definitely talk about that, because I also want to talk about, when you're in a career, how novelty as a concept of, like, let's say Neuralink, and I spent a good bit of time towards the end of my career at Capital working on brain-machine interfaces, and how now all of a sudden that's come back. And it connects me back to, remember our friend Garima?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, because I'm here to tell you, the only person left at Capital is the Colonel. Go look at the website if you don't believe me. The only person that's left is the Colonel.
So I'm not sure if that just means no one else wants him, or...
No, there is nobody left. There's nobody left. They all retired or quit.
Wow.
Yeah. Anyway.
Wow. All right. Well, on that note, my friend, and my friends out there in the interwebs, good night. Thank you for stopping by. Don't forget to subscribe. Send us some comments at The Real J Pittman on Twitter and Instagram, I do believe. I'm at Nostradamus. You can find me pretty much everywhere. Put some comments, do whatever. Have a great week. See you all next time. Take care.
Later, everybody.